Belonging is not optional in the human experience. The nervous system is actually wired at a survival level that is deeper than thought, deeper than belief, deeper than anything in a coaching program can reach by itself. Long before you had any concept of ambition or personal growth, your subconscious learned one thing clearly. Has there ever been a time when you were right at the edge of something bigger? It was a decision that you were trying to make, but you found that you kept overthinking the decision. There was a part of you that felt closer than ever to leaping into that. But then there was also a part of you that felt that even though you could see that next level clearly, you couldn't quite step into it, that there was something in the way. And you know, it wasn't a fear of failure. You know that it wasn't imposter syndrome because you've done enough work to know what that feels like. And this wasn't it. It was something older than that. It was almost like a pull to stay recognizable, to stay familiar to the people who knew you before any of your success. And here's a question I don't think I've ever heard asked out loud. Can I belong and become who I truly desire to be? Because somewhere underneath it all, that question is running. And today we're going to look directly at it because once you see it, it loses most of its power. First, I want to say this clearly because it matters. If you felt this, it doesn't mean that you haven't done enough inner work. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean there's yet another thing to fix. The entire pattern of needing to fix something keeps more people trapped than it helps. So it doesn't mean that you're more attached to people pleasing than you thought. It doesn't mean you failed at becoming who you want to be. It means you're freaking human. And your nervous system is doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's what's happening: belonging is not optional in the human experience. The nervous system is actually wired at a survival level that is deeper than thought, deeper than belief, deeper than anything in a coaching program can reach by itself. Long before you had any concept of ambition or personal growth, your subconscious learned one thing clearly, and that is being able to be understood and accepted by the groups that you belonged in, and that is safety. Fitting into the world of people you came from was safe. Being too different was a threat. Now, there's a lot of caveats there. The type of family you grow up in can put you anywhere on a spectrum of to the extremes that you will go to be acceptable to family. And then some of it is just imprinting of watching how others operate in the world, watching what makes one family member acceptable and get love and affection, and that imprints on us. And we learn that. It happens before we even have words to speak. But here's what happens when you start to become someone genuinely new, not a goal upgraded version of yourself and not a more successful version of the identity you've been living, but someone that the people you've known the longest can't fully recognize anymore. Your subconscious runs the math, and the math says this expansion might cost you belonging. It might cost you friendships. It might cost you love. So it pulls the brake. It doesn't announce itself, and it's not going to show up as a clear, identifiable fear. It shows up as a second guessing a decision. It shows up as downplaying yourself in certain rooms. It shows up as being fully expressed in some spaces, but noticeably smaller in others. It can show up as an achievement in your life that you don't lead with because someone in your circle of family or friends might not get it or might have something to say about it. You've probably explained that to yourself as being private or humble or strategic about what you share with whom. And sometimes that is true, especially if you run a business and you understand how law of attraction and counter intention works. That is true. But sometimes it's an alarm, and the alarm is not telling the truth. It was built for a different time. It was built for a version of you that needed to fit in. It was built for a version of you that needed to belong. And it hasn't gotten the update yet that you are safe to continue expanding and sharing and being and doing who you are meant to be. I worked with a woman. She was an academic. She was genuinely intelligent, more than capable, who had wanted to write a book for years. Not a vague someday. She wanted to write a novel. She knew what the book was. She had the ideas, the expertise, the time, and had started to write many times, but she could not make herself do it. Every time she sat down to do the work, something happened. She'd get busy. It would just feel uncomfortable, and she would stop and start and stop and start over and over. She came to me thinking that she had an imposter syndrome issue, or maybe a confidence problem. Maybe she just didn't want it as much as she thought she did. And it was actually none of those things. When we got underneath it, there was a belonging alarm with deep roots. And then sitting right on top of it was her uncle's voice. She had told someone in her family about this book she wanted to write, and he had looked at her and said, "Who do you think you are, Stephen King? People like us don't successfully sell books. Who do you think you are?" Now, that phrase didn't create the block, but it landed directly on top of a nervous system imprint that was already there deep underneath the surface, something that her subconscious had been carrying for a very, very long time about what it felt like to be fearful of not belonging and how far she was allowed to go before she stopped being one of them. Her uncle's words hit that wound like a key in the lock. The resonance was instant. So his words didn't cause it, but they resonated with an old fear and resurrected it. And it went up like a wall when it came to writing her book. If you do this, if you become someone who writes books and people read them, you won't be one of us anymore. I know that sounds absurd, but that is the meaning that the very literal mind, the illogical meaning that the very literal mind can put on events. So from that moment forward, every time she would move toward her book, her nervous system alarm fired off that it wasn't safe, that she wasn't going to belong, and it was enough to make her stop. When we went back to the original moment where she felt that sense of loss of belonging, the thing that her uncle's voice had attached to, and we resolved it at that earlier moment, the charge came off of it. And before we even finished our work together, she was writing and doing so without any hesitation whatsoever. She didn't need more motivation. She had the motivation. She didn't need the better morning routine, the accountability partner. She needed that alarm to stop firing off. And here's what I want you to hear in the story: people like us. That's the belonging alarm said out loud. And within our families and in our friend groups and in our churches and other religious organizations that we belong to when we're much younger, those stories that shape our belonging alarm are much more insidious. They're hidden, they're nuanced, and it takes going to what the subconscious understood those stories to mean and the importance that it placed on them to change that. When this pattern resolves, and it does resolve, it's permanent when it's done correctly. It is not just who you are. You stop code switching depending on what room you're in. You're no longer wearing a mask or putting on an act. And it's not because you made a decision to show up differently, it's because the filter is just gone. You are your whole self. And the decisions that you've been avoiding become clear. The visibility that felt risky starts feeling like the most natural thing in the world. And it's because you're now a version of yourself that feels safe in those rooms. There's not a part of you that's managing to feel safe. And for the people who can't hold you as you do grow into who you're becoming, you stop managing them because you recognize they're on their own journey and you let them be what they are. You let them be what they are, and you stop letting them set the ceiling on what you're willing to allow yourself to pursue and achieve. And here's what that's worth, not just to you, but to every person whose life changes because you stopped pulling back. Because the belonging alarm that kept you from writing the book doesn't just cost you the book, it costs every person who needs to read it. That's not pressure. It's just the truth of what's at stake when you let the alarm run the show. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with a question that this whole video is built around. Not why do I self sabotage, not who am I afraid of disappointing. It's this: where are you pulling back from becoming more? Because some part of you is afraid it is going to cost you a relationship, it's going to cost you being in a room, it's going to cost you love, affection, connection. And you don't have to share that answer with anybody, but it's worth knowing what it is, because once you know, you can let it stop making decisions for you. And if you can't understand what's causing it to be there, then we can connect and we can uncover that for you. Because if you're at the point where you can see the alarm, you understand what's running it, and you're ready to resolve it at the level where it actually lives, you're tired of managing it, reframing it, and resolving it. Details on working with me are below. And one more thing, this travels quietly. If there's someone in your life who is in this exact place, who keeps stopping right before something bigger and they don't have the words for why, send the video to them. These are the conversations that change things so that we can step in to the fullness of our potential and what it is that we're here to be, do, and lead in this lifetime. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel.